Today, we'll talk about how optimizing the ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids in your diet can help you outlive cancer. The ratio between omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids is well known to significantly influence human health. It is implicated in the development of many of the chronic diseases that plague Western nations, such as obesity, autoimmune disorders, allergic disorders, and even cancer. Despite this well-established impact on the body, mainstream treatments of cancer do not utilize it as an attack point against the disease. So today, we're going to look at what exactly omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids are, how they affect our body, and why the ratio between omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids is important. Then we'll look at how this ties into cancer, and lastly, what changes you can implement into your daily life to optimize it and improve your chances of outliving cancer. My name is Cedric. About 3.5 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with an aggressive type of cancer. My brother and I, both being students of molecular biotechnology at the time, instantly set out to research how he could improve his chances of survival. We ended up developing the Mosaic method to help him, and nowadays, our dad is still alive and doing great. We founded Marchwood to teach the exact steps that he took to other cancer patients so that they may achieve exactly what he did. Before diving into the specifics about cancer, I think it's important to understand why the ratio between omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids is so important to human health in general. Omega-3 and omega-6 are two families of polyunsaturated fatty acids. They are both considered essential nutrients because our bodies cannot synthesize them. That means we must get enough of both types in our diet. Both omega-3 and omega-6 fulfill various functions in our bodies, but when considering their effects on cancer, the most important part is how they influence inflammation and the immune system. Whilst you might often hear that omega-3 fatty acids are anti-inflammatory and omega-6 fatty acids are pro-inflammatory, this is, strictly speaking, not true. It's not the fatty acids themselves that are pro or anti-inflammatory, but rather molecules that are derived from them. To produce the anti and pro-inflammatory molecules from omega-3 and omega-6 respectively, many of the same enzymes are used. This means that omega-3 and omega-6 compete to be processed by them. You can imagine it somewhat as though you're randomly picking out balls from a bowl. If 90% of the balls in the bowl are red and only 10% are green, you're going to be very likely to just pick a red ball based on random chance alone. The same thing applies to the enzymes. The omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids in your body are analogous to the red and green balls in our example. You randomly picking out balls represents the enzyme, which doesn't actively choose omega-3 or omega-6, but rather metabolizes whichever it happens to bind to based on random chance. Because of this, your body cannot independently regulate the production of pro-inflammatory molecules from omega-6 or anti-inflammatory molecules from omega-3. If the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 within your body is heavily skewed towards omega-6, more omega-6 will be processed by the enzymes. That means more pro-inflammatory molecules will be produced. If the ratio was instead skewed towards omega-3, the opposite would be the case and more anti-inflammatory molecules would be synthesized. Consumption of one over the other will thus indirectly cause the production of more pro- or anti-inflammatory molecules respectively. These pro- and anti-inflammatory molecules in turn affect the immune system. Broadly speaking, pro-inflammatory molecules will initiate and amplify an immune response. Anti-inflammatory molecules have the opposite effect, serving to dampen and resolve immune responses. Given that the immune system is one of the body's main defenses against cancer, it's obvious how having too many anti-inflammatory molecules would suppress and dampen the immune system and reduce anti-cancer immunity. And you might now think that having a high load of pro-inflammatory molecules would be great against cancer. The logic being that pro-inflammatory molecules generally initiate and amplify immune responses, including those against cancer. However, having too many pro-inflammatory molecules can actually end up having the exact opposite effect. When excessive levels of pro-inflammatory molecules persist over prolonged periods of time, it can lead to something called chronic inflammation. This is a state where the immune system is constantly hyperactivated and overstressed. Chronic inflammation accelerates immune cell aging and causes them to become senescent. Basically, that means that they become overwhelmed and that they tire out, becoming less responsive. It's similar to how a human can end up burning out when placed under too much pressure. Besides this, chronic inflammation also triggers regulatory mechanisms that directly blunt the immune response. In the end, this means that too high a level of pro-inflammatory molecules actually ends up decreasing anti-cancer immunity. Since we want to maximize anti-cancer immunity, we have to strike a balance between having too many and too few pro- and anti-inflammatory molecules at the same time. As we discussed earlier, this balance is greatly influenced by the dietary ratio between omega-6 and omega-3. Based on data from evolution as well as analysis of modern populations, an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio somewhere between 3:1 and 1:4 seems to be optimal. However, the standard Western diet has a ratio much higher than this, with values ranging from 20:1 all the way up to 50:1. This places most people in the West firmly within the scenario of eating way too much omega-6. The reason herefore is the abundance of foods that have an extremely high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. The main culprits are vegetable oils and hydrogenated seed oils such as safflower, cottonseed oil, corn oil, canola oil, soybean oil, and a bunch of others. They're very common in the Western diet and they have an extremely high ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. All of them are widespread in the West and they have a very high ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Since we're aiming to lower this ratio and bring it closer to 3:1 to 1:4, the best way to proceed is to simply eliminate all vegetable oils and hydrogenated seed oils. For cooking and frying purposes, these oils should be replaced by tallow or ghee, which are both far more stable at high temperatures. Many nuts and seeds also contain far more omega-6 than omega-3 and should thus also be avoided. Now, any foods that contain very little fat in total are of minor concern in general, as they won't significantly influence the dietary ratio between omega-6 and omega-3. When it comes to increasing the intake of omega-3, grass-fed animal products, fatty fish, and some select oily seeds such as flaxseed and chia seeds contain favorable fatty acid profiles. Beware that grain-fed animal products possess far worse omega-6 to omega-3 ratios than grass-fed animal products. Now, these foods that are high in omega-3 aren't always available or easily attained by everyone everywhere. Utilizing omega-3 supplements such as fish oil or algae oil capsules or including flaxseed oil in the diet can help overcome this limitation. Of course, having too little of both omega-3 and omega-6 can also happen, but it only occurs if very little fat is eaten in general. This is basically only the case when a high-carb, low-fat diet is consumed. Besides the lack of both omega-3 and omega-6 in such a diet, the carbs contained therein also pose a threat to cancer survival. However, diving into the details of that isn't the goal of this video, so I'll simply leave a link in the description below where Merlin explains how carbs feed cancer. Alright, let's recap what we went over today, because it was quite a lot. We first looked at the importance of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. We then talked about how the dietary ratio between the two affects the immune system and thus cancer. After that, we went over how we can optimize this ratio by implementing changes to our diets. And of course, in the end, we touched on how eating low-fat, high-carb diets can hurt cancer survival. Like I said, if you want to know more about that, there'll be a link in the description to a video that explains it in greater detail. Learning about all of these things is much easier than implementing them into your own life. So, if you want help with the implementation, or if you want to socialize with other cancer patients that are going through the same struggles as you can join our community project at marchwood.com/outlive. Since the project is still in its build-up phase, if you join now, you'll stay with the price you join at for the rest of your life. Now, thank you dearly for your time. I wish you swift healing and lasting health. Peace out.